Hello, my name is Justin Bright, and welcome to Kerbal Space Program version 1.8.1 in my next small step RP-1 career mode playthrough. And yeah, we are on our way. We are doing a lot of crewed missions, but let's take out a little bit of a timeout for that so that we can put up a satellite around the moon. And then I think we also have a visit on the Pioneer spacecraft to deal with, as well as some long-term planning. So let's get right to it, shall we? Ooh, this is exciting. We have unlocked the first space station contract. It's got to have one docking port, for at least 3 crew. Needs to have a perigee greater than 250 kilometers, so between 250 and 2,000 kilometers in orbit, which is not so bad. Room for 3 crew, bring at least 2 to the station, have 2 on board, rendezvous with space station, keep them on board for 30 days, remain in stable orbit, transfer to the station to specified orbit, and then return home on a crew capsule. Okay, yeah, so maybe twice? Yeah, it's hard to actually read what this contract wants me to do precisely, but it looks like, oh, here we go. Design, build, and launch space station to Earth orbit. Crew with for a month with at least 2 crew. Bring the crew safely home. Once you're done, you'll get missions to perform further crew rotations and resupply missions, as well as expansion or replacement missions. That is super exciting. I really want to do this. I really want to do this. I think we're going to do some more Gemini Advanced stuff and do like the manned orbiting laboratory and send that up around Earth first to test it out. But I really badly want a lunar space station, like real bad. It is one of the biggest things that I've wanted to do since I started this series, is to have a lunar gateway style place where I could have reusable lunar landers going down to the surface of the moon and then back up to do science in orbit, and then have that be my gateway that could also send missions out further to Mars or beyond. So super duper cool. Looks like there's also a Martian space station, which would be even more amazing. So yeah, maybe these are some of my big goals in the future. All right, so as promised, we're still working on a lunar landing and a sample return, so that should be coming up shortly. But we can do, I think, I'm fairly confident that we should be able to do a crewed lunar flyby within the next 4 years. Let's accept this contract and get those funds. That's right. Now we have 3 million funds that we can play with. All right, we have 3 million funds. What the heck are we do with 3 million funds? My God. Well, we could build a level 6 pad for 1,500 tons if we really want to get ourselves to the moon in a big hurry, which, as we're seeing, like, that's getting more and more necessary. Like, the biggest thing that I have designed, which, like I said, I don't think I've unveiled this yet, but I have a Paladin 2 design in mind that is going to be able to get 26 tons to low Earth orbit. And 8.4 tons on its way to translunar injection, which I think should be enough to do some orbital missions, but is definitely not going to be enough to do like lunar landing or anything like that. Like, that's going to require an even bigger rocket. So even a 700-ton pad is not going to be enough to do what we need to do at the moon. And so we're going to need at least the 1,500 ton, and we're probably going to need this unlimited pad in the not too distant future. Other things that we are looking at is, I think we can buy yet another production line at the vehicle assembly building for 3.5 million. That would be important and good. It's going to cost us 4 freaking million funds to get to 150 science, which, to be fair, that puts you into the space shuttle era. So 150, the 150 science limit cuts you off around 1976, 1980. It's like it's in here somewhere, I guess. Yep, 150 for spaceplane era science. So at that point, you're working on a space shuttle and moving beyond that, and so things start to, I don't want to say they get wonky, but the focus is definitely on this part of the tech tree. I'll just say that much. But there is plenty to do out past this point. Like, you can unlock all kinds of cool things. There's lots of engines, lots of configurations, wheels, booster types. There's plenty of, like, tank upgrades and things like that. So it's not like there's nothing out here, but it's also just like the cost starts getting astronomical. And I'm not sure how well balanced it is compared to what we know is incredibly well balanced and well put together, the Apollo space race portion of the game. So anyways, 4 million funds to get past, to get up to the space shuttle era, which seems reasonable. We will need 3.5 million to place flags, as I've gone into great detail before. So that's something that is going to need to happen, but we don't need to do that quite yet. We are definitely not there yet. I could upgrade. Oh wait, I'm actually waiting on mission control upgrade in just 3 more days. There's some really ridiculously expensive things that we need to unlock. For example, anything that has the word Apollo on it has like a 1000% markup. Like this RCS block that was used on Apollo is going to cost me 170,000 funds to unlock, which, woof. Why would I do that to myself, do you think? I'm just not sure how that could possibly be worthwhile compared to using a generic. That seems bonkers to me. Anyways, we can unlock this one, but whatever. Yeah, so like the Apollo docking mechanism probe costs about 1 million funds to unlock. That sounds totally fair and balanced. Some space station pieces are going to cost us probably upwards of 1 million funds. So yeah, unlocks are starting to get ridiculously expensive. The Apollo drogue, Apollo capsule is 1 million almost. The rogue docking port's almost 1 million. Some of this is shared, of course. But yeah, we've got lots of really big cash expenditures coming, but we're not quite there yet. So I hesitate to spend all my money on KCT upgrade points, but I want to spend some of them, right? So we've got 9 available just from the science that we've been accruing, which is pretty darn nice. But let's go ahead and just like spend a bunch. Let's just get like a ton of points. I want to get like 1 million funds worth of points right now. All right, there we go. We have 66 points to spend now. Let's work on our number 1 line, get that up to 4 build points per second. And then we can upgrade our second line quite a bit to get to about half that, 2 build points per second. Very, very nice. We're going to upgrade our research and development to get up to just north of 0.9 science per day, which means that this has reduced the time to build this stuff dramatically, as well as build this stuff. So yeah, we spent a bunch of money doing that, and I'm kind of looking through our contracts and I'm wondering what it is that we can do to make up these funds. So the lunar exploration stuff is going to get us a lot of money. Like this is going to get us another 1 million when this finishes. Flybys and orbits of the outer planets, I think, are going to be worth a good amount of money. Like those are millions a piece. I got to imagine that the look at that, I actually have this one unlocked now. Yeah, this is almost 400,000 per Apollo mission that I launched, just regular orbital mission that I launch. And this doesn't even require me to do the ATV thing where I get into, like, I have to do rendezvous docking and boosting of orbit every single time. So that's nice anyways. Makes that a little bit easier on me as far as the grinding is concerned. I've got space station stuff, which is probably going to be worth a lot of money as well. So yeah, like, I feel like I should just like dump all this. I should dump at least a little bit more into our KCT stuff. I'm like a little bit. I'm a little bit worried about like over leveraging myself or something. Oh, look at that! You can build multiple points at once. That's pretty nice. I can buy a total of 98 points, so I should expect to be able to buy another like 40. Boop 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 boop. Okay, that sounds reasonable. I think maybe. It's really hard to say. Oh my god. Okay, so we've spent 2 million funds on that, and I'm going to save 1 million because we have some big things coming up, like the F1 engine and the J2 engine. Like those two things alone are going to cost me about 1 million funds to unlock, and there's definitely nothing that's going to reduce those costs. So we definitely want that. So I'm going to save a little bit as we are researching as quickly as possible. Let's get this up to like, I don't know, not 0.94. That seems like a number. 0.951. And the rest, let's get into our vehicle assembly building. So we're going to get... I want to make sure that we're not neglecting our main line, but we also want to bring up our secondary line. So we are now at 4.2 and 2.5. So we have put in something like... We have put in some huge number of points. I probably should have like recorded how many I actually put in just now, but we've dramatically improved the ability of our space program to actually build and launch big, heavy rockets. All right, here on the pad, a rocket or a spacecraft I am calling the Ahriman 1 as, you know, as a reference to, whoa, what the heck was that? Yeah, the all the launch clamps got wonky. Ignition. And we still have liftoff, slowly rising off the pad in a Tele-Centaur rocket is our Ahriman payload, which is a spacecraft that we are sending to the moon to do all sorts of science and scanning. It's Ahriman because that's another Final Fantasy IV reference, or Final Fantasy in general reference, I suppose, as those are giant eye monsters, flying eye monsters. So, yeah, rising very, very slowly off the pad is this particular rocket. This is the last of my old-style Tele rockets. There was a time, well, so let me back up. The original way that the actual Atlas rocket is built is it uses the LR-105 as the sustainer engine, and it uses a pair of LR-89s as the booster engines. At some point in the middle of the upgrades for the LR-89s, and when I first got the H1 engine, I found that they performed a bit better than the LR-89 at the same tech level. That is no longer true with the latest version of the LR-89, which I am now using on all rockets going forward. But this is one of the last ones that I've built using the old architecture, and so I'm just going to fly the darn thing, and that should be totally fine. But I found that the new LR-89s compared to the first config of the H1 performs a bit better, has a bit more thrust, better thrust-to-weight ratio off the pad, so it brings it up off of this abysmal 1.1 thrust-to-weight ratio at the surface. All right, so I think we can probably just move this right along. Yeah, so old architecture, basically, but it's a launching a Centaur upper stage, which should hopefully be quite capable. All right. Knocked off our boosters. They go flying off into the distance, and we are heading up towards hopefully a good orbit. I haven't had a lot of test flight failures lately, so I'm probably due for one at this point. So I got to keep my eye out for that. But the rockets that we're using at this point get to be like even the initial configs are a lot less failure prone than the original ones were. Sorry, the original ones. When I say the original ones, I mean the ones that I used early in my career would start with something like a 30% chance to fail right out the gate, which, you know, is not super awesome. But nowadays, rockets start off a lot more capable and able to dealing with some ullaging issues. And there we go. Now we're back on track. Very good. It was a weird little... I think it got, like, pushed off to one side a little bit there. Yeah, so this is also... you can see now my Ahriman spacecraft, which is using what I'm now realizing are deprecated parts. I saw the GitHub push go through that marked these parts as officially deprecated only after I built this spacecraft. So this is going to be the last one that I use using these parts, but you know, whatever. I'm just not that stressed about it. It's also packed with all of the fun science experiments that we have unlocked in the latest interplanetary science node. So we get to do all kinds of new science around the moon and a little bit around Earth. Off to one side just for a second. This is for some reason marked as a relay, probably because I've got a big, this big retractable parabolic antenna up on top here. Data auto, that's what I'm looking for. I just want to see all the different experiments. We're not going to turn anything else on quite yet. I definitely don't want to be extending any booms or anything while we are still working on circularizing. But yeah, that's kind of what this is intended to do, is just to do all of the science. It has all of the science experiments that you could ever want. And it also has these scanners, so we're going to be able to go out to the moon, get into a decent orbit, hopefully, and then try to do both the altimetry scan and the multispectral scan to get biome data of the moon, which is going to be incredibly important for when we finally are going to be landing people on the moon. So when we're landing robots on the moon, it's really not that big of a deal to just land wherever's convenient. But when we're getting people out there, that's when we really want to make sure that things will work out, and we know where we're going and all that. All right, so just wrapping up this burn, and there we go. We have successfully inserted into a good Earth orbit in the plane of the moon. Fabulous. All right, so simple enough now to do a nice transfer to the target. Very nice. Nothing too terribly strange about that. I'm having that issue where it's not showing me the intercept, but I assure you that it is going to be there. Yeah, node's in just 18 minutes, so I don't see any reason why not to just make it happen. All right, as we're flying around, catching a little bit of sun on the big chunky solar panels that we're using to try to compensate for the massive power draw that even these deprecated versions of the ScanSat parts draw. So yeah, that's a big part of the mission plan for this one, is figuring out how to deal with that. And it looks like I do have some MLI on here, so I shouldn't need to bring this Centaur out to the moon with me. I should be able to just crash it into the moon and then circularize with the generic thrusters that I have about 1,000 meters per second packed on there. But it's been a while since I've done this, so I just need to make sure that I'm not going crazy and that those actually are the numbers, because this should end this burn with about 1,000 meters per second. And then if there's any MLI on this tank, then in theory I could bring it out to the moon and use it, although this is probably near Earth avionics actually, so that's probably not the best move. All right, so we're just trying to burn this out a little bit early. No, not good. I had a shutdown when I was just messing around with the engine configs here, or the. No, maybe. Come on, ullage up, and then. Okay, well that didn't work at all. Yeah, so I'm trying to get this done before I go out of near Earth range. Because I want to get a... Okay, because I'm trying to do something like this, where I will be able to make this maneuver out to the abort node execution again. Come on. No! Stop! Wrong way, stupid. Gosh. Okay. Well, I've already screwed this up, so that's fine, I guess. We no longer have any control because I messed up my time warping. Alright, so I guess that's fine. We're just going to have to do this with this, so whatever. Let's see. Now I can make this burn wherever, so a little bit more convenient of a place out here, perhaps. Something like that is what I'm looking for here. Because I would like to get into an orbit that is between 5,000 and 2,500 kilometers. 10 to 50,000, greater than 25,000 kilometers is ideal according to the ScanSat sensor. So yeah, it wants me to get into a nice, like, tall circular orbit, basically. Yeah, so 57 meters per second of delta V to get into this orbit. Fine. Now, if I were to circularize that, 275, 26, that's going to cost me another 600 meters per second of delta V, and then going down from there into a orbit that is good for this ScanSat sensor, which is 10 to 500 kilometers. So I could just get down to a 500 kilometer orbit, or actually we would want to be really close because I can't remember where low orbit is, but I think... Okay, so it's about 150 kilometers is where we're going to want to be for space low. So I can just dip all the way down to 145 kilometers, and then I want to do one more all the way down. And there we go-ish. There we go. Okay, so that's just sort of, that's really cool looking, by the way. But that's sort of kind of what I'm looking for. Like, that's not, I'm not going to use these maneuvers all told, but that shows me that this is going to cost me more delta V than I actually have. So we're going to have to be a little bit more, how to put it? We're going to have to be a little more careful with how we do this. I think the step is we're not going to be able to have the circular high orbit. I think we're going to have to... oops, I shouldn't have got rid of all of them. So if I did something like this, where I just start in a... what do you call it? With a low paraseline, then I can have an orbit that is up or over 4 million, and then we'll get a good amount of that data from there. And then I will be able to bring it down, and it will only cost us about 800 meters per second of delta V all told. So something like that, I think, like some kind of compromise orbit that will maybe slowly get us the both scans. Some kind of compromise here, I think, would be the way to do it. So let's move this up to a million. Something like that. Nice compromise, I think. And then I should be able to bring it down from there with all that delta V that we have on board. Yeah, would have been nice to have have done all this with our Centaur, but I fat fingered it, so whatever. All right, so as we are flying over, I can indeed extend all of our antennas and everything else that we are using here. We have magnetic scans for days. We got boom arms, we got antenna, we got all kinds of cool stuff happening here. Yeah, so this is basically every science experiment that I have, and I'm trying to actually put the parts on there. Yeah, this says includes magnetic scan 1. Like in the info, on the part info, it shows that it includes magnetic scan 1, but it doesn't actually seem to include anything about it here or in here other than actually having this one over there. So I'm not sure what that is about, like if you can actually only use the higher level ones instead of the lower level ones and having to include everything, because I was kind of hoping that it would have both experiments and I could just do both with the one part, but is what it is. So yeah, we are getting some science data from around high space around Earth, and then we will send that back, and then we will go do the real work around the moon. All right, so that burn is complete. So let's go ahead and point ourselves. All right, and so that gives us perpetual data, or perpetual power, because these things are just like powerful as heck. Wow, like really a lot, because we are going to be doing the ScanSats, and those are going to take up a tremendous amount of power, and I want to make sure that these will actually last through the through some wear, because we're still using tech level 1. All right, so that should do it for that. We are targeting a 1 million meter moon paraseline for now. But then I can bring that down. Okay, it says 2.5 is ideal, so that's 532 meters per second. And then at this... All right, so I'm using RCS to bring this down just a little bit more because I'm just not sure that I'm going to have the Delta V to quite do everything that I want to. Let's bring this down to 800,000 and then look at what the numbers give us. Okay, step 1, 800 kilometer by 2.5 million, that's 527. Step 2, reduce our paraselene, not that much, to 145. Step 3, circularize. There we go. So yeah, this will work. This will cost us 900 meters per second, and we have 917, so that will give us a little bit of wiggle room for reorientation of the spacecraft. So yeah, there we go. That's the plan anyways. There it is. We are approaching the moon now. Yeah, so we are just now getting started doing our science around the moon. We are transmitting back to Earth with a powerful, but tuned down slightly, S-band antenna, which even at this range, we are still getting full 165 kilobits per second, which was the whole plan. Like I actually looked at how much connected to the DSN that far away, what the power of this antenna would be. So I'm trying to learn how to do that a little bit better. All right, so the next node is going to be burning into orbit of the moon, into a near polar orbit, which will slowly allow us to map the entire surface of the moon, ideally. Teeny tiny thrusters, just making slight adjustments. I've used just the little three-way angled RCS thrusters, and I've put two little ones up on top for reverse thrust, because I don't need to do that much. Saves me a teensy tiny bit of mass on what do you call it? The extra thruster bits. But mostly the issue was I couldn't find a place where I wanted to stick those on the side, so I needed to put them down in the back and then still actually have that forward thrusting or reverse thrusting ability. All right, so we are firing up our engines for our lunar insertion burn. Everything's so far working out great. I'm really happy about it. As we get in a little bit closer here, we have 2 days of electric charge with no sun. So that is, and with all of our science experiments going full tilt, because we have all sorts of experiments that are going to be running over a very long period of time, because we have all the new stuff, the new magnetic scan, new mass spectrometry, new cosmic ray, new image spectrometry. 2 new cosmic ray experiments, it looks like, actually. So we've got plenty of science to get done here so far. And that does not include running the scan set as well. And there's also, of course, the constant infuriating presence of the what do you call it? The communications idle amounts are always so incredibly expensive as to drive me insane. All right, so yep, we are just burning our way in on Aerozine thrusters. No drama there, but we are going into the shadow of the moon, which is blocking out all of our sunlight. But like I said, we have plenty of battery, so we don't have to worry about that. We have good connection and signal to Earth because we are doing this at, well, actually, because we're doing this kind of sideways. So yeah, the moon rotates relatively slowly, so it's going to be a long time before we get these scans completed, but I'm hoping that this thing will live long enough to make that happen. And burn complete. Fantastic. So I'm just going to remove the other nodes because I don't actually need to worry about it for now, but this is going to be our ScanSat orbit. It's not great, but it is going to allow us to actually execute the mission with the Delta V that we have, which is, you know, the most important part. So we are just going to allow the spacecraft to tumble while we are in the shadow of the moon until we come around to the other side. There we go. Now we have some lovely, lovely sunlight. Point ourselves up towards the sun. Those gigantic solar panels just soaking up the rays of the sun. All right, so as that settles itself in, next up, I want to take a look at the ScanSats. So we are indeed getting all of the good science from Lunar Orbit High, but now there are 2 ScanSat experiments to run. So the altimetry and the multispectral scan that is going to give us biome data. So they should, this one is probably going to complain at me that it's too high, yep, which is fine. But this one is going to tell me that we are suboptimal. Well, that's fine. So long as we are like not completely suboptimal, then that shouldn't be too much of a problem. But we do need to do a couple different orbits here where we are scanning from there, and then we are going to scan much, much lower with this sensor here when we get into our low orbit. So I could honestly probably just turn this off because this says too high. We're above 500 kilometers, so we can't use this at all. So I could probably just turn that off and save the electricity. But we will be doing the multispectral scan, and hopefully that will work. So there is that, and let's take a look at our power. So we've had a long time to settle in our pointing, so we can turn this off. Turn off the avionics, saving us about 58 watts of power. And here we go. We are perpetual power, and we should be for a long time. I'm hopeful that we are going to be able to get all of these experiments done. Are rotating already. All right, so I'm just gonna have to jump out of this instead of trying to leave it there, because when you are not focused on a vessel, even if you have the avionics on, Kerbalism shuts the avionics off for you. Like, it just treats it as if it is avionics off, so that you don't have to spend the extra power, which is lovely. So yeah, that is that. So this will stay up here in orbit for a good long time, doing a tremendous amount of science. And I can't remember if I actually even accepted the contract. I did not. But yeah, I'm going to accept the contract for biome and altimetry scan of the moon, which is going to give us a little bit of money and a lot of good data that we are going to be able to use for our program going forward. All right, so glamour shots complete. I think that is mission success for now. I will just have to be monitoring how well this goes, and when we get that contract complete, that's when we know that it's time to shift our orbit. All right, just like that, we are getting a ton of good science in, but contract complete. Biome ScanSat survey of the moon has been successful. Fantastic. That is going to be a humongous help. Look at that. There we go. Getting good biome data of the moon, which will tell us all the different lovely places that we can go and visit and get lots and lots of good science. Fantastic. So now I think we can actually shift the orbit, although it depends a little bit about the science that we're getting back. Because we're still looking at another 7 days of infrared radiometry, 3 days of magnetic scan 2. I could leave this up in orbit for another 60 days to do cosmic ray science, but I'm not sure that I want to do that. I think I want to save the, like, be a little conservative with the batteries on this thing and get it down into low orbit. I think that would probably be the safer thing. There'll be other vessels that I can do this cosmic ray science on. So let's go adjust the orbit now. Fantastic. Look at that. How cool. All right, so we've already sent back almost 100 science, but now it's time to get down even lower into the orbit of the moon so that we can get even more. So we have 380 meters per second of delta V remaining, and we are going to Well, let's actually use... Let's use MechJab just so that we can see the better ways to do this. Change our paraselene to 145 at our aposelene, which is going to cost us just 86.7 meters per second. Sounds fine to me. And that should, in theory, be, and we can actually turn off the multispectral scan, which I believe is complete. $97.9. Well, that's fine. I can't see any actual gaps, so I'm just not going to worry about that too much. And we are lowering our orbit so that we can get into a nice tight low orbit of the moon and do yet more scanning. Because these are up to 21% wear, and I'd really like to make sure we finish this mission before my power lowers too much. Let's change my aposelene at my paraselene and bring it down also to 145. Actually, I don't know why I'm being weird about that. I can just circularize at paraselene. Boop. There you go. 283, leaving us with just a couple meters per second at delta V. All right, as we rotate around to the far side of the moon, we have pre-programmed in, actually not the far side of the moon, it just happens to be in darkness. We have programmed in our maneuver to expend the last of our delta V and get into a nice low circular orbit around the moon, from which we can do lots of good science. Start that up. Because you'll see now that all of these numbers have kind of reset, because we are now doing low science, which has higher values anyways, which is why I'm a little more excited to do that than I was to finish out the experiments in high lunar orbit. Yeah, so this is one of those things that we're doing to get a lot of, okay, 142 by 147, that keeps us in low orbit at all times. Point sun is up, even though it's, you know, on the other side of the moon. But yeah, so I want to be getting a lot of science, and that is one of the things that this is intended to do, is to just gather up a whole bunch of science, because that got us so far almost 5 KCT upgrade points for free, so about 100,000 extra funds worth of upgrade points. Oh, am I completely out of... Okay, wow. It took a lot more delta V to, shoot. Okay, it took a lot more delta V to, move around than I thought it would. I definitely thought that having like 10 meters per second of delta V left was going to be plenty, but gosh, that's not great. Yeah, so we are now rotating around wildly, and I can only hope that we are in the plane of the sun, because I'm going to have to do the cheesy thing of just jumping out as soon as we have good sun exposure on our panels, and then just never visit this craft again. So, I mean, whatever, is what it is. If I would have realized how much that was going to use, I probably wouldn't have been time warping, and I probably would have been much more careful about it. So, that's fine. Just user error once again. But yeah, we should be able to get a good amount of exposure, which is going to bring us to perpetual power, which is lovely. 80, 87, 89, 90. 100%. All right, so I'm going to jump out now. Yeah, that was a dumb mistake, and that was my fault for not being more careful about the orientation of the spacecraft. So, whatever. I really don't want to run this whole mission again because I forgot to slow down a little bit at the very last possible second. Just a little bit of a dumb user error that I had planned for, but I just didn't do the thing I was supposed to do. So I'm gonna call that fine. So yeah, we have that, and I don't really need to have the battery supply rigged up. But this has both a it has a communications array. It has the big antenna, the dish, but it also has a level 1 UHF transmitter. So theoretically, it could also bounce back signal if it happens to be in a very advantageous spot. But I'm not sure that it's not going to be very useful for that. Like it would require a more powerful transmitter and a better orbit to be useful to landers on the ground. But that is something that I'm going to have to start thinking about very seriously in the near future, probably when I do my geostationary ComSat network. That is also going to have to be a consideration. So yeah, there we go. We have that going, and one ScanSat is devices. Yep, this ScanSat is disabled. This one is enabled, and we are beginning to get our low resolution scan data in. So that should happen fairly quickly. Yeah, so we're already up to 33% after just a couple of days. Getting lots of science. We're up to 169 science, which is just excellent. We already have a whole lot of good stuff researched, and we are pushing on for more and better stuff. All right, so research has been spent on getting us up to mature capsules. So we now have a path that leads us to Apollo, which I am super excited about. So we've got lunar landing research. We've got higher tech engines coming online. We have the F-1 coming in just a little while. Down here. F1 series, yes indeed. So yeah, really cool stuff is on the way. This is obviously the point where in real history the lunar landings happened. So we, because this is 1969 is what this row represents, and that's obviously when Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin walked on the moon. But we are obviously not going to make that because that was 3 years ago for us. But we're catching up as far as technology is concerned. All right, so 8 free upgrade points and a little bit of extra money from contracts. So I can just buy a couple more. And I would love to give this just a little bit higher. Or there we go. Okay, so we got a bunch of points spent. Yeah, it's really moving up now. We've spent 575 points total, almost 300 in our vehicle assembly building, 270 in research and development. We've accumulated 2,965 science, which is just awesome. That seems like a lot of fun. There's a whole bunch more to do, which I really like. You get 3,000 science in stock KSP, and you're basically done with the tech tree, I think. And speaking of things getting into orbits and finishing missions that have been long planned, we have the Pioneer Venus 2, which is approaching Venus within the day. Just a couple hours away from the sphere of influence of Venus. I'm just warping in till we get there. In just a moment, we should be entering in. And there we go. We are now in the sphere of influence of Venus. We've been here a few times, but now it's time once again to hopefully get this landing contract, for goodness sake. So let's take a look at what our disposition is now. And I think I've decided that I need to just not stress about sunlight. So let's see, what can I do when I get here in orbit? I have 3,439 meters per second of delta V. Okay, so we're not going to be able to perfectly circularize, because that would cost me 3,551. So we're going to have to do that thing again where I kind of just back it up a little bit, like this, kind of. And then we will do our landing. And then ideally, we should be able to, by the time it actually gets down, I'm hoping that it will rotate around into sunlight, is kind of my thinking. But anyways, we are now transmitting a couple of science experiments that we did not have around Venus last time. So yeah, very, very cool. So let's go ahead and we're going to break into this orbit. And 3,200 meters per second to get into a 1.5 million apophyse. All right, then it's now coming up. We are flying around, making our way, getting tons of science both from the moon and from Venus, just swallowed up entirely by the gas-wrapped surface. Let's go ahead and adjust our cloud so that make sure that's correct. And look at that. You can just see through the surface in certain points. How cool. All right, so burning into orbit of Venus, which is not quite what the Pioneer Venus multiprobes did, or any of those sorts of things. I think at least most of them just kind of slammed into the atmosphere, but I haven't been able to make that work. Now that I've visited a couple of times, I'm more okay with actually running simulations, because with Crash, you can run simulations that start you in the orbit of whatever. So I could not very easily, but pretty easily, I could set up a test that would recreate the parameters of this landing and see kind of what it looks like, and like give myself a nearly hyperbolic re-entry profile and see how I could make that work. I'm trying to limit how much of that kind of stuff that I do, because it feels almost cheaty. Because one of the interesting things about the real space program is that we didn't know. We weren't 100% sure how these things were going to react when we threw a probe into it. We had certain ideas and were able to model the behavior of these vessels in a lot of ways, but we weren't sure, right? And that's kind of what I'm trying to model here. Is my ignorance on this is a little bit of hey, we didn't know then either. But I can, as I do more and more testing and more things get into the orbit of different bodies, I think it's more and more okay to run those simulations, because even with NASA astronauts, they were able to do they were able to detect a tremendous amount of good information about Venus and about other places before they ever got there. So they were able to make informed decisions and informed guesses about the composition and the way that certain things would behave aerodynamically and orbital dynamically, I suppose. So anyways, that's kind of my thinking, is that I'm going to do my best guess on the first launch towards any given body, but subsequently I'm going to allow myself to do more in the way of testing. So in this case, I kind of did not do that, where I basically just reran the same mission that I did last time, which I'm realizing now was kind of a huge mistake after I've done my testing on Earth of what a good landing capsule looks like and where the bottlenecks are as far as performance. And the bottleneck is not attaching your avionics directly to your heat shield, which of course this does, I think. I'm trying to remember if I did, because I feel like on one of these designs I embedded a cubic octagonal strut to actually be the surface interface in between the heat shield and the avionics, but I don't think I actually did that on this one. I thought maybe I had, but I'm not seeing any evidence of that here, so whatever. But yeah, we are burning slowly into our good orbit of Venus, which is shedding upwards of 3,000 meters per second of delta V, which is the biggest thing about our... that's when I talk about what bears the load on a particular mission, shedding 3,000 meters per second of delta V by expending fuel in orbit is a way to make sure that I don't blow up my capsule by slamming it into the atmosphere. I probably could have done just as well by doing a very high atmospheric pass with the this shielded spacecraft and then just like done a whole bunch of orbits around. The reason why I had to do it in one last time was battery life, but this should, in theory, have a lot longer battery life than my previous attempt did. All right, so we are finally coming to the end of this burn. We have dropped down to just 7,500 meters per second of delta V. Or no, an orbital velocity of 7,500 meters per second over the surface of Venus. Fantastic. So that makes us not circular, but pretty darn close. All right, so one thing to note is that Venus has incredibly slow rotation, so I can't bank on dropping off the probe and then waiting for the planet to rotate to the point where our orbits align, where the orbiter is going to have signal and we are able to transmit back. So I'm going to see now exactly where I get signal again on the other side here, and that is where I'm going to try my darndest to land. All right, so it looks like all the way over here is where we are looking for. On the flip side of that, we could also do it probably from over on this side, but I'm just not as sure that we're going to be able to make that. But that is actually just about as much time as I have for this episode. We can now bask in the fact that I had planned on, when I was getting close to this, the orbit of Venus, I was going to change out how I was approaching so that I could actually flip around and have my close pass be on the side that would be convenient, so I wouldn't have to do all this fighting, but I appear to have forgotten. Yeah, this is future me saying that, of course. So yeah, that is something that I'm going to have to deal with the consequences of, and we'll see the result of that next time. So if you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. Let me know what you think down in the comments below, and I will see you next time.